we have with us Foreign Secretary Sir Vinay Kwatra. We also have on the dais our ambassador to Japan, Shri Sanjay Kumar Verma, and joining us are additional secretaries Vani Rao as well as Naveen Srivastav, looking after East Asia and America's division in the Ministry of External Affairs. I would request Foreign Secretary to make an opening remarks explaining what all has happened during this last couple of days of the visit, and then we'll take a few questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, and very good evening and namaskar to all of you here who are present here for this briefing. Ambassador Sanjay Verma, Additional Secretaries Ms. Vani Rao, Naveen, our spokesperson. I think the last 2 days have been extremely important in terms of what the Prime Minister's engagement in Japan have entailed. Prime Minister Modi has just concluded his official visit to Japan over the last 2 days, and he was here to participate in the 3rd Quad Leaders Summit in Tokyo at the invitation of Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Kishida. In addition to participating in the Quad Summit, Prime Minister held bilateral meetings with the President of US and the Prime Ministers of Japan and Australia. Those were earlier today. Let me first begin with the Quad Leaders Summit. I must mention up front that there was an excellent rapport and warmth between the leaders during the summit, and they all had productive and meaningful discussions that were marked by cooperative and constructive agenda and a very, very positive approach to the discussions. The continuing and common priorities of Quad cooperation have already been captured in the joint statement that is available in the public domain. Let me simply underscore some of the key elements of the conversation among the Quad leaders, and these have also been highlighted by Prime Minister Shri Modi during deliberations of the Quad summit also. First, action-oriented cooperation among Quad partners, as also between the Quad partners and the countries of the Indo-Pacific for free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific, aimed at peace, stability and prosperity in the region. Discussions during the summit were focused on mutually beneficial consultations, and as I said, agenda was constructive and the tone positive. 2. Support for ASEAN unity and centrality as the Quad and the countries in the Indo-Pacific pursue their shared goals in the region. 3. Focus on common efforts to respond on COVID-19, including in particular the post-pandemic recovery and strengthening of health security and health-related infrastructure. 4th, work together to promote infrastructure delivery, as also efforts to bridge the infrastructural gaps in the Indo-Pacific region, and do it in a manner that does not burden the countries of the region with unsustainable debt and unsustainable infrastructure projects. Fifthly, the Quad leaders also welcomed a new Indo-Pacific partnership in maritime domain awareness, a regional initiative to help the countries bolster their capabilities to respond to humanitarian and natural disasters, as also to combat illegal fishing. Next, shape and build partnership for greater cybersecurity and for transparent, trusted and reliable supply chains across the region, including in particular in the field of critical and emerging technologies. Quad leaders also issued strong condemnation of all forms of terrorism and a call for expeditiously bringing to justice the perpetrators of the Mumbai and Pathankot terror attacks. Also, coordinate more effectively and timely responses to the humanitarian assistance, disaster relief incidences in the region in future through the agreed Quad HADR guidelines. Prime Ministers also participated in the formal launch of the Quad STEM Fellowship, which will be offered to 25 students from each of the Quad countries. Prime Minister, towards the end of the Quad Summit deliberations, also put forward specific proposals that could contribute to guiding the Quad agenda in months and years ahead. Some of these proposals include: 1. Need to take solid initiatives on the field of climate finance and sustainable developments. 2. Emphasized on the importance of building appropriate platforms for the industry and businesses in the Quad countries and between the Quad countries and the Indo-Pacific countries to forge partnerships in the field of critical and emerging technologies. And 3. Informal and formal mechanisms to strengthen partnership among the like-minded countries in the areas of common interest. As I mentioned upfront in the beginning, besides participating in the Quad Summit, Prime Minister also held bilateral meetings with President Biden, President Kishida, and the Prime Minister of Australia. Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister of Australia. First, with regard to the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. The two leaders appreciated the importance and need of regular interactions between the top leaders of the two countries. The meeting was warm and substantive, and also a very important opportunity to discuss significant areas of our bilateral engagement and also the important regional and global issues. They also reiterated their shared commitment to maintaining a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden welcomed the signing of the Investment Incentive Agreement that happened yesterday. This agreement will boost investment by the U.S. Development Finance Corporation in sectors of mutual priority. You would perhaps be aware, DFC's current portfolio in India amounts to investment of around $4 billion. We understand it has also planned investment of around additional $1 billion in sectors like renewable energy, supply chain diversification, agriculture, MSME financing infrastructure, and healthcare projects. Prime Minister Shri Modi welcomed participation of US industry in the Indian defense manufacturing under the Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat program. A new initiative for critical and emerging technologies, ICET, was launched to forge collaborations, including with the participation of government, industry, and other stakeholders on both sides in this very important area of critical and newly emerging technologies. As I mentioned earlier, both leaders reiterated their shared commitment to free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Yesterday, the Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi also attended the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework of Prosperity, along with the President of US and Prime Minister of Japan, Shri Kishida. A joint statement has also been issued to underline the vision and key elements envisaged in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework are already available in the public domain. I would simply mention that the IPF framework is structured around 4 pillars, and these are currently being negotiated among the Quad countries. And these 4 pillars are: 1, relating to trade; 2, supply chains; 3, infrastructure, clean energy and decarbonization; and 4, tax and anti-corruption. Collective discussions, as I mentioned, under these pillars will be initiated following the launch of this framework, and the following final contours of this would emerge based on discussions among the Quad countries. During his bilateral meeting with Excellency Prime Minister Kishida of Japan, both leaders undertook a comprehensive stock-taking of the entire framework of bilateral partnership to carry forward our cooperation in diverse areas, including in the field of defense manufacturing in India, a skill development partnership, trade and technology partnership, cooperation including for resilient supply chains in the region, and other areas. This is Honorable Prime Minister Modi's 5th visit to Japan since becoming Prime Minister, and his 2nd meeting with Excellency the Prime Minister of Japan. Prime Minister Kishida has invited Prime Minister Shri Modi to visit Japan later this year for the annual summit. In fact, during the summit, both Prime Ministers underscored the importance of maintaining the momentum of regular high-level exchanges between the two countries. Earlier during the day today, Prime Minister Shri Modi also met in reflection of the importance attached by Japan to India-Japan ties. He also met with 3 former Japanese Prime Ministers, including Excellency Mr. Suga, Excellency Mr. Yoshihiro Mori, and Mr. Shinzo Abe, who, as you know, are also the key leadership of the Japan-India Association. Prime Minister Shri Modi and former Prime Minister Shri Abe, they share a good rapport over a long years of interaction. We met 15 times as Prime Ministers. In 2014, during their annual summit, ties were upgraded to a special, strategic and global partnership. The Japan-India Association itself has been instrumental in promoting people-to-people ties and economic linkages between the two countries. To deepen the link between a stronger and wider India-Japan commercial partnership in a manner that clearly has a link with India's trade, technology, investment and development priorities, Prime Minister Shri Modi held extensive and a wide-ranging interaction and discussions with the leaders of Japanese business and industry yesterday. Yesterday, in addition, Prime Minister also had a very vibrant and robust interaction with Indian diaspora in Tokyo. Prime Minister Shri Modi also held a bilateral meeting with the Australian Prime Minister, His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese, today afternoon, of course, on the sidelines of the Quad Leaders Summit. Prime Minister congratulated the Australian Prime Minister for his election victory, and both leaders reviewed the multifaceted cooperation between the two countries under the framework of comprehensive strategic partnership that includes important areas of trade and investment, defense manufacturing, renewable energy, in particular the green hydrogen, education, science and technology, in particular the new and emerging areas of technology, agricultural research, sports, and people-to-people ties between the two countries. Both Prime Ministers affirmed their desire to continue the positive momentum in the bilateral relationship. Prime Minister Modi extended an invitation to his Australian counterpart to visit India at an early date. I would stop here and would be happy to take a few questions that might be there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Before I take questions, just the ground rules. Please identify yourself and the organization that you represent. Also keep your questions very, very sharp. I saw Madhav there, please.
And limited to the topic.
Yeah, that of course. And please limit it to the visit to the Prime Minister here. Yeah, Madhav, the floor is yours.
Sir, a sensational claim being made by Japan.
Could I have your
name?
name?
I'm Madhav from Times Now.
Yes.
Sir, a sensational claim being made by Japan. They've said that China and Russia had joined military exercises in the northeastern part of Asia, even as the Quad summit was underway, where military jets, fighter jets were flown. Do you see this as some kind of a deliberate positioning on part of China and Russia, because all of this has happened while the summit was underway? And clearly the statement also reflects a number of points which would directly reflect on China and Russia. Thank you.
Sure. I think before we go to the next question, let's capture all the China questions in the room first.
Yes, sir.
So let's go one by one and then we'll come back to that in one single shot. Yeah, please.
Sir, Manish Chand, India Rights Network. My question is that if one studies the joint statement carefully, many of these initiatives and remarks seem to be aimed at China. Clearly, there was a lot of discussion. Could you give a flavor of the discussion on China or China-related activities at the summit beside what is there in the joint statement? And also an infrastructure partnership. $50 billion have been committed. Now, how is this going to be, what about the individual contribution? How is it going to work out? And is it a kind of response to China-led BRI or a similar mode of connectivity? Yeah.
Sure. Please.
Naveen.
Sir, I'm Naveen from ANI. My question is, sir, that what is the status now on IPEF? Are we a part of IPEF? Are we negotiating it? Can you give us some more clarity on this, sir?
Okay. Is there anybody
Okay.
else?
Any other linked question which we can capture?
Yeah, please go ahead. That's okay. Go ahead.
Sir, what exactly were things that were, Akshay, NDTV, what were the things that were mentioned regarding India's handling of COVID? Did President Joe Biden mention that India's handling of COVID was better than China?
Okay.
I thought you need to take the seat and then I'm happy to give you the floor, Abhishek. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Perhaps the final China
Please
question.
introduce yourself.
I'm Abhishek Kapoor from Republic TV, sir. Perhaps the final China question. Was any defense cooperation or military component within Quad discussed in the context of China? Or is it being conceived at any stage in future?
So I think we'll stop here and give you the floor and then, unless it's China related.
Yeah, yeah.
Is China related? Okay, then why don't you take that first?
So, Polemy from India Today. My question is about the response that came in after the launch of the IPEF yesterday from the Chinese foreign minister, where he said that this Indo-Pacific strategy is going to be a failed strategy. I believe it was in the larger context as well around this the Quad Summit and the IPEF as well, but your response to the same.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I think let me just get the last question out of the way. I don't think it's correct for me to what foreign minister of another country says. So I think that's a question which should rather actually pose to them. But I think let me just go back to what I said right in the beginning, that the discussions during the Quad were based on a very constructive and a forward-leaning cooperative agenda between the Quad countries, as also between the Quad and the other countries of the Indo-Pacific. Naturally, during the various agenda items of the Quad, the discussions did focus on what could be the way forward for cooperation among the Quad countries. The leaders also discussed the challenges and the opportunities that are there in the Indo-Pacific region. They also looked at how different economic priorities, as I mentioned in my remarks, those relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, the post-COVID recovery, building of health preparedness in terms of health infrastructure so that such pandemics could be fought, were discussed very extensively and discussed in terms of what they can do forward. I think the economic dimension of how the countries of the Indo-Pacific attend to their common needs, build each other's capacities, strengthen the resilience of their economies. How do they shape an agenda of trade, technology and investment that builds the economic capacities and individual economies of Indo-Pacific region is something which is essentially the sum and substance of the Indo-Pacific economic framework. Somebody asked the question whether India has, as you saw, Prime Minister Shri Modi was present at the launch of the IBF, and as I mentioned right in the beginning, the cooperation within the IPF will be structured along 4 of its pillars, and I mentioned those pillars. Now the discussions among the Quad countries will start on these 4 pillars, and based on that they would decide which pillar to progress at what speed, etc. That's naturally this is something in which all the countries which were part of the IPEF launch would be involved in those conversation. I think the question relating to infrastructure, 50 billion plus, how it will work, what will happen. You see, again, I'll refer back to my comments which I said. That the leaders, when they discussed way forward of cooperation within the Quad, as also the challenges, it was mentioned very clearly by the leaders, including in particular by our Prime Minister, that the infrastructure cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, the filling up of the gaps in the infrastructure within the region, have to be in a manner that it does not result in unsustainable burden and unsustainable bouquet of projects for the Indo-Pacific. And for this, the Quad countries need to come together. And the figure that you saw is a projected figure. It seeks to kind of contribute assistance. And naturally, that infrastructure cooperation which will flow out of this will precisely address these points, that the projects are sustainable, they are demand-driven, they meet the specific needs of the Indo-Pacific countries.